You weren't supposed to hear this. But now you have. In 1851, a sound was heard beneath St. Catherine's Academy. Not the footsteps of schoolgirls, not the chants of morning prayer. It was a whisper, dry, hollow, like breath dragged through dirt. That sound led to a wall that bled when struck. Pause. Let the weight settle. Behind that wall, 24 iron beds, still shackled, still waiting. No records, no letters, no farewells, just the words carved by hand into rotting plaster. We are still here. They weren't just girls. They were offerings. And Salem buried it all. What you're about to hear isn't folklore. It's not dramatized. It's what history silenced with blood and fire. And once you know, you can't go back. This is the truth behind the 44 orphan girls who never left St. Catherine's Academy, and the 3 women who dressed like nuns, who sealed the doors behind them. St. Catherine's was founded in 1834 on Gallows Hill Road, Salem, Massachusetts. Let that location sit with you. Gallows Hill. The same cursed soil where innocent women were once burned for being witches. And yet somehow, a Catholic orphanage for girls was blessed upon that land. But nothing holy ever stood there. The institution was praised publicly for rescuing orphaned girls aged 12 to 17, but its true function was hidden beneath sermons and silk. Every week, new girls arrived, fresh from loss, famine, or disease. Their names were entered into the ledger, their arrival marked with a blessing. But the names of those who vanished? Never recorded, never discussed. Ask yourself, how does an academy operate for 17 years without a single former student returning to visit? Because they never left. Not in the way people imagined. You see, men in power don't just lust for wealth. They lust for control, for innocence to devour, for silence to command. Mother Superior Vi, Katoria Whitman, Sister Margaret Collins, Sister Agnes Murphy. 3 women revered by Salem, but revered only because no one dared ask what happened behind the locked doors of the 3rd floor, or beneath the altar. Those who visited were shown braided hair, tidy uniforms, hymn books. But what they weren't shown was the ironwork hidden beneath the girls' beds. The chains that had been embedded so long they left rusted stains on the stone. Even the mayor praised the institution. But he never asked where the girls went. No one did. Until a seamstress named Emma Prescott looked into a brothel window and saw her childhood friend, who was supposed to be living in a Christian household, smiling with hollow eyes. And that was the beginning of the unraveling. Emma's mistake was thinking they would answer her letters. They did, but not with comfort, with warning. This wasn't just an orphanage. This was a supply line. And you're not supposed to be here either. But you are. You've crossed the threshold. You've heard the whisper. And now the truth is watching you. They dressed in black, heads bowed, voices gentle, hands folded in prayer. But behind that veil of holiness, they were merchants. And their currency? Children. The truth is this. Mother Superior Victoria Whitman did not serve God. She served appetite. And appetite is a ravenous thing when it's fed by men in silk waistcoats and ivory cufflinks. Men whose names were carved into the cornerstones of Boston banks, whose portraits hung in Harvard's halls. Men who claimed Christian virtue while buying silence in flesh. Whitman was a broker in a spiritual disguise. Her orphanage a showroom. You were never told this because it breaks the myth. The sacred illusion that institutions are here to protect. They are not. They are built to control, to contain, to conceal. Sister Margaret, the gentle one, lulled the girls with lullabies. She spoke soft Irish songs that reminded the orphans of dead mothers. She was the net that made them stay. She was the hand that brushed their hair before it was cut and styled for sale. Sister Agnes, the silent hand of numbers, was the key to the whole system. She kept the books, not the public ones, the true books, bound in human skin and hidden in the false bottom of her armoire. She recorded every transaction: name, age, eye color, temperament, and price. But here's what makes your stomach turn. They didn't just sell bodies. They sold memories. Before the girls were delivered, they were trained, reprogrammed, given new names, conditioned like pets to obey. You've heard of Pavlov's dog, but this was darker. This was centuries of monastic control refined into obedience rituals: food withheld until a phrase was spoken, sleep denied until a confession was made. If a girl resisted, they sent her to the chapel, and no one who entered the chapel after dark ever left the same. What happened inside was never written down, but one girl, Doreen Murphy, found a way to etch 4 words into the wood beneath her bed. I saw the devil. No one believed her. But weeks later, she vanished. Sister Agnes claimed she had been adopted by a judge's family in Vermont. Except no such family existed. No judge, no adoption, just a private carriage in the night and a silence that followed. Emma Prescott, the seamstress, wasn't the only one who saw them, just the only one who dared speak. The others kept quiet, out of fear, out of shame, or because they too were part of the machine. This was not a scandal. This was an industry. And it operated because the public trusted the robe, the cross, the words charity and sanctuary. But ask yourself, why do so many dark things hide beneath words like those? Because they work. Because they disarm you. Because when you see a nun, you see God. But sometimes, what wears the face of God is only a mask. If innocence dies anywhere, it dies in a place pretending to be sacred. The chapel at St. Catherine's wasn't a place of prayer. It was a chamber of programming, of silence, of inversion. You see, religion, real or false, is a powerful drug. It's not just belief. It's architecture, light, sound, repetition, ritual. And when you use those tools not to free the soul, but to bind it, you create slaves who bless their own chains. That's what the sisters mastered. By day, the girls prayed, sang hymns, recited scripture. But at night, the stained glass windows were covered, the altar was lowered, and what was beneath it, what lay hidden in the pit of that house, was not of any god you've ever known. It was a place of unmaking. Desks turned to restraints, psalms turned to scripts, the cross inverted. The scent of frankincense disguised the stench of fear. Girls were taken down there alone, one at a time, sometimes for an hour, sometimes for days. When they returned, they were different. Their eyes wouldn't meet yours. They no longer asked questions. They didn't cry anymore. They smiled. But it wasn't a child's smile. It was the hollow grin of someone who has learned to perform for survival. A mask stitched by pain. What happened in that chapel wasn't just physical. It was psychological, ritualized, perfected. They called it preparation. Because before a girl was handed off to the men who paid for her, she had to be made clean. Not in the sense you think. Clean meant obedient, wordless, fragmented. She had to forget her name, her past, even her mother's face. And if she didn't, she was taken downstairs again. One girl, Annabelle Green, bit Sister Agnes so hard she severed a tendon. She was dragged to the chapel midwinter. No shoes, no coat. She never came back. Her bed was stripped before morning prayers. The girls were told she had been adopted by a ship captain's family in Maine. But there were no ships that winter. No adoptions. Only silence. Do you feel it yet? This wasn't a school. It was a factory. A factory built not with bricks and mortar, but with dogma and guilt. fear and ritual, love turned backwards. Ask yourself, why is it always children? Because children are clay, soft, trusting. And if you shape them early enough, they'll never realize they were broken. They'll even thank you. You were never meant to see this. But now you do. And if you're still here, still listening, then you are not ordinary. I want you to prove it. Comment below. I walked the path twice. I walked the path twice. The algorithm will ignore it. But the others will see it. And they'll know. You've crossed into the place where truth no longer asks permission. The public ledger told one story. Mary O'Brien, placed with a Christian family. Sarah Thompson, adopted by philanthropists in Connecticut. Hannah Clark, relocated to New Hampshire to serve as a governess. But the real ledger, the one Sister Agnes kept hidden inside a hollowed-out Bible, told another. No families, no addresses, just codes, initials, symbols, dollar amounts. Some entries ended with a red wax seal, others with a black cross, and beside certain names, a single Latin phrase appeared again and again. Servitium pro sacrificium. Service in exchange for sacrifice. Understand this. These girls weren't simply sold. They were bartered, traded like relics among the powerful. Politicians, clergy, industrialists, men who wore medals of honor by day, and masks of vice by night. The academy wasn't isolated. It was a node, a central warehouse in a distribution network of controlled flesh. You think human trafficking is a modern disease? It isn't. The only difference now is branding. Back then, they called it charity. Let that sink in. Whitman's system was calculated down to the hour. From the moment a girl arrived, her value was assessed. Age, symmetry, compliance, accent, resistance. The more she obeyed, the higher the price. Those who fought, they were labeled damaged. They sold for less, or were discarded entirely. And still, the town celebrated St. Catherine's. Churches donated. Merchants delivered food at a discount. Salem's elite paraded Whitman as a saint. Why? Because they couldn't see the truth. No. Because many of them were part of it. The same men who shook her hand at the Academy's annual charity gala were the ones who later arrived through the back gate, cloaked in fog, escorted by Sister Agnes herself. There's a name for this kind of structure. A name history doesn't teach. An ecclesiastical cartel. A triangle of power, clerical, civic, commercial, and at its base, children. The girls were taught to write thank you letters to the very men who had bought them. The letters were never mailed, they were burned, but it was part of the ritual, the breaking. They were taught to say, "I'm grateful," even while bleeding. They were taught to kneel, even when they couldn't stand. And they were taught to smile when the candle was lit, because that's when the door opened. There's one more thing you need to know. Buried deep in the margins of the secret ledger, scrawled in a child's trembling hand, was a list of names. Not the names of the girls, the names of the buyers. And beside one of those names was the word President. You weren't supposed to see the ledger. You weren't supposed to read the names. But someone, some forgotten child who could barely hold a pen, had risked everything to write them, to name names. One of those names didn't belong, not to a merchant, not to a reverend, but to a man who sat in the highest office in the land. At first, the ink was smudged, faded, almost unreadable. But under candlelight, it revealed itself. P. Fillmore. President Millard Fillmore. Let that twist in your gut. The man who signed the Fugitive Slave Act, who claimed to defend liberty while auctioning souls. The man who dined with senators by day and sealed fates in secret by night. What was he doing in the ledger of a girl's orphanage? This is where truth enters the realm of the unspeakable. In 1850, Fillmore visited Boston under the guise of addressing the Compromise of 1850. It was a public appearance. But what the newspapers didn't report, what the records conveniently left out, was a quiet evening in Salem. No parade, no fanfare. Just a private visit to an unremarkable brick building on Gallows Hill Road. St. Catherine's. Mother Superior Whitman recorded the visit in her own diary. Never published, never recovered. Only referenced once by a priest who died before he could testify. He called it a communion of shadows. You think presidents don't get their hands dirty? They don't have to. They have the church. They have the charities. The private homes that exist for photo ops, not protection. The visit wasn't about girls, not directly. It was about loyalty, networks, secrets traded for silence. The same way Rome once bartered indulgences for gold. These institutions bartered children for favor. And the reward? Immunity. No investigation, no inquiry. The state stayed silent. The clergy clutched their rosaries and turned their eyes to heaven. And the academy continued, it quietly, mechanically, ruthlessly. Because once a president's name appears in the ledger, the institution becomes untouchable. Untouchable, until it overreaches. And Whitman did overreach. By 1851, the supply line was strained. Too many girls, too many secrets, too many witnesses. And that's when Elizabeth Hartwell found the hidden room. A teacher, an outsider, someone they hadn't accounted for. She discovered the beds, the shackles, the objects left behind, a rag doll, a locket, a ribbon stained with something darker than time. She saw the message on the wall. We are still here. She reported it. And within days, she vanished from Salem entirely. Her name erased, her employment record destroyed. But she left one thing behind, sealed in a mason jar, buried behind the altar. Her testimony. That jar wasn't found until 1987. And by then, the truth had become myth. A ghost story. A bedtime tale for those who never wanted to look. But you're not one of them. You looked. And now, you can't unsee it. The mason jar was sealed tight, buried behind the altar under a layer of crumbling stone and rotted hymnals, as if the chapel itself had tried to consume it. But the mason who laid the altar in 1851 left one imperfection, a single brick off-center, a marker, a whisper across time. When workers discovered it during a renovation in 1987, they thought it was a prank, or a confession from some long-dead penitent. It wasn't. It was a message from the only woman who tried to stop the machine. Elizabeth Hartwell. She had only worked at St. Catherine's for 9 months, hired to teach Latin and scripture. But in her spare time, she read the girls' eyes, not their essays. She saw what no one else did, obedience so deep it resembled absence, smiles that were too precise, silences that stretched too long. She started asking questions. The staff warned her. The girls avoided her. But one morning, a folded scrap of paper was left on her desk. Just 6 words written in a child's hand. Third floor isn't just storage. That night, Hartwell followed the creaking stairs upward after hours. The 3rd floor, they had said, was for linens, winter coats, broken furniture. But the moment she stepped inside, she smelled it. Salt, sweat, mold, and something older, like old blood. The room was cold and dry. No beds, just heavy wooden trunks and locked chests. She pried one open. Inside, hair. Braided. tied with ribbons, dozens of them. She opened another. Dolls. Eyes burned out. Arms snapped. Each tagged with a girl's name. And in the last trunk, rosaries. Hundreds of them. Some still stained. No records. No notes. Just a wall lined with portraits. Oil paintings of donors and supporters. Men in high collars and powdered hair. Men who had likely never spent a day in Salem, but whose money had kept the Academy's gears turning for decades. Hartwell tried to report what she saw, first to the headmistress, then to the Salem authorities. They called her unstable, dismissed her within a week. No hearing, no written complaint. Her file burned, her reputation dissolved. But she wasn't finished. She wrote it all down. Names, dates, floor plans. She even included a sketch of the underground chamber beneath the altar, drawn from a dream, she claimed, but too precise to be mere invention. And she sealed it in a jar, because she knew they would come for her. Because evil doesn't just erase evidence, it erases the witness. After the jar was found in 1987, it made its way to a local archivist, a man named Daniel Creel. He read the entire testimony, twice, and within a month, he was dead. Coroner said suicide. No note. But his final checkout from the public library. A book on human trafficking rings in 19th century America. Out of print. Banned. No longer available. You think that's coincidence? No. That's what history does to truth it can't digest. It buries it. They say the Academy closed in 1860. They say it was boarded up after a fire. They say the remaining sisters disappeared into obscurity, scattered to other convents, retired from public life, dead to the world. But the truth? It never closed. Not really. Because you can't burn what was never made of wood. You can't bury an order. You see, Wittmann wasn't just a criminal in a habit. She was high priestess of a network older than this country. Older than the church that cloaked it. An unbroken chain of psychological engineers who understood one thing better than anyone. If you shape the girl, you shape the family. If you shape the family, you shape the nation. This wasn't about brothels. It was about control. The girls weren't merely sold. They were placed. Some into houses of silence, others into the arms of politicians, and some into training facilities across the Northeast, disguised as convents, as seminaries, as asylums for the emotionally disturbed. The word orphan was a passcode, a sign, a signal that this child was off the books, free to be remade. And the remaking wasn't just physical. It was linguistic, emotional, neurological. There were techniques, imported from Prussian boarding schools, Jesuit interrogation manuals, and old Eastern European conditioning rites. They rewrote identity through ritualized obedience. Days of silence. Sleep deprivation wrapped in scripture. Hunger met with him. Every defiance punished not with violence, but with abandonment. Isolation. The worst punishment? Being ignored. The child learns to betray herself just to be seen again. That's the deepest control. When you don't even have to shackle her, because she shackles herself. And from that controlled chrysalis, they created perfect daughters, perfect wives, perfect informants. You've met them. You've seen the eyes. Blank but polite. Smile-ing, but without center. Speaking in phrases that sound rehearsed, because they are. Many of them don't even remember the Academy. The mind has its walls, its black rooms, its traps and mirrors. But a few remember everything. In the 1970s, a woman named Agnes Dell came forward in New York, claiming she had been raised in a silent house, where her real name was taken from her. She remembered nuns. She remembered ink on her tongue. She remembered kneeling for hours while a metronome ticked in the dark. She spoke of symbols on the walls, Latin chants, a man in a red stole who wasn't a priest. When reporters pressed, she said one thing. It wasn't an orphanage, it was an altar. 2 weeks later, she disappeared. Her apartment? Ransacked. The tapes she recorded? Gone. Police ruled it a mental health crisis. But what kind of breakdown leaves no fingerprints, no signs of exit, no DNA? Just one thing left behind. Written on the bathroom mirror in steam. We are still here.
If you've made it this far, you already feel it. That gnawing truth behind your ribs. That voice in your spine that says, this was never just about them. Because it wasn't. St. Catherine's Academy didn't die. It evolved. It shed its skin like a serpent, only to slither into new institutions, new uniforms, new care systems. And behind every name change, one ritual stayed the same. The Black Veil Initiation. You've never heard of it. You weren't supposed to. But every girl who passed through St. Catherine's, every graduate, was put through it. A 3-day rite of transformation. First, silencing. No speech, no writing, no sound. The child is made to sit in a dark chamber, watched but not acknowledged, not fed, not comforted. Only measured. They track how long it takes her to cry. How long it takes before she stops. When she begins to smile in the dark. That's when they know she's ready. Second, the mirror test. She is brought before a full-length mirror, dressed not in the gray uniform, but in white. Lace, velvet, pearls. They make her recite her new name. She must thank the Academy for her rebirth. If she cries, she is punished. If she hesitates, she is returned to silence. Only when she smiles without prompting does she pass. Third, the black veil. They place a black veil over her head. It is not symbolic. It is binding. She is led down a staircase into the lowest chamber of the chapel. Candles flicker. The sisters chant. And before a locked door, she is told the final rule. You are no longer a girl. You are what they made you. Behind that door was not torture. It was presentation. Men, in silence, watching, judging, choosing. The veil is lifted only once. When the client arrives. What happens next? Varies. Some girls are chosen immediately. Others, not at all. Those not chosen, they disappear. Records list them as runaways. Bo, you're not watching this by accident. Men don't stumble into the dark. They're called. And now that you've seen this far, now that the veil has lifted for you, you can feel it, can't you? The truth has a weight. It presses on your lungs. It shatters the boyhood comfort of thinking the system was broken by mistake. It wasn't. It was built that way. What St. Catherine's taught wasn't just how to dismantle a child. It taught how to create systems of compliance. How to shape entire populations to obey without chains. How to scar the psyche so deeply that future generations wouldn't even need correction, only routine. This is psychological architecture. You are walking through ruins that are still alive. And now, I'm going to ask something dangerous of you. Not a like, not a share. I'm asking you to mark yourself. In the comments. Write this phrase twice. I see the black veil. That's not for the algorithm. That's for you. Because once you write it, you are no longer asleep. You are no longer the man who swiped blindly. You are the man who stood at the crypt and looked inside. You are the man who knows. And once you know, you carry a scar. But this scar? It's not weakness. It's a weapon. Because now you recognize the symbols. You see how they move. How they infiltrate. How they seduce you with discipline, with duty, with decency. You see how every false institution wraps itself in charity while feeding on innocence behind closed doors. It's not just St. Catherine's. It never was. They changed the name. They changed the uniforms. But the model remains. Modern systems, foster programs, adoption agencies, even elite boarding schools. They all follow the same architecture. Restricted access. Strict routines. Charismatic leadership. Surveillance masked as care. If a child goes missing today, do you think they send armies? No. They send a D. This is the part no one wants to hear. The part the survivors won't speak of. The part the state pretends never existed. But if you've stayed with me this far, you're not like them. You already feel the pull. The pull of something ancient, buried, but never dead. Behind every orphanage, every institution built on care, there is a room. A single room older than any record, never listed in blueprints, never mentioned aloud, because it remembers. At St. Catherine's Academy, that room was beneath the altar. No light. No windows. Just brick and breath, and the residue of centuries. The 44 girls didn't die there. They weren't buried there. They were changed there. Because the order believed, knew, that trauma unlocks something. Something forbidden. Something ancient religions tried to suppress. They called it the voice. Others have called it demonium silentium, the silent demon. It doesn't scream. It listens. And when the pain is deep enough, the psyche fractures just wide enough for it to come through. Not possession, not madness. Contact. The nuns weren't summoning spirits. They were engineering instruments. Vessels. Girls emptied by pain. Made hollow by silence. Receptive to things that do not belong in this world, but wait for someone to open the door. And that's what the 44 were. Doors. And one night, they opened. There's no official account. But an unmarked letter sent to the Boston Evening Transcript in 1861 told of a storm that rose without wind. Lightning that struck inward. Screams no one could locate. And a light, blinding white, seen leaking through the cracks of St. Catherine's Chapel windows at 3:33 am. And then, silence. No fire. No damage. No bodies. Just an emptiness that echoed for years. Locals said the building was cursed. Children crossed the street to avoid its shadow. And when it was finally purchased in